Hi guys, David O'Sullivan here. Welcome back to My Favourite Films. This is a series in which I go through some of my favourite films of all time and give you kind of my in-depth thoughts on why I love the film so much and why I think it's so great. I've done two installments before, one on Bambi and one on the original Blade Runner. So if you haven't seen those and you want to check them out, be sure to go and check those videos out. Currently up on my channel right now. And I know I haven't done one of these in a while. The last one I did was Bambi, I think, which was last August. Because I did Blade Runner 1 to celebrate the film marking its 35th anniversary. I did Bambi to mark it celebrating its 75th anniversary. And now Planet of the Apes, the original 1968 film, is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. Planet of the Apes is also one of my favourite films of all time. Along with Bambi and Blade Runner, I'd probably also put it in my top 5. You know, they're all quite different films, but they're some of my favourite films of all time, and I thought now more than ever would be a perfect opportunity to give you my thoughts on Planet of the Apes. I've talked about it briefly before in other videos. I think I talked about it in a kind of favourite science fiction films video. I talked about it here and there. I did initially record a deconstructing a classic, and I tried multiple times to put that video up, but what with it having footage from the film and stuff, it kept getting taken down, and I wasn't really happy with the video because it was longer than it needed to be. I kept rambling and repeating myself, so I decided not to put that video up and instead do a My Favourite Films video, because I knew that come the anniversary I was going to do this video anyway, so I thought I'd wait and do this one. So here it is, my favourite films. It is the 1968 Planet of the Apes. And yeah, obviously Planet of the Apes is a massive franchise now. It's probably one of my favourite franchises because I also did a ranking of the Planet of the Apes franchise. That's another one I forgot to mention, but I also talked about the film in that, so no surprise there because it ended up number 1, I think, the original. And if you heard my thoughts on the film and the franchise as a whole in that video, you'll know that Planet of the Apes is one of my favourite franchises because there's some that aren't that great, but even the ones that aren't that great I still like. At the Tim Burton remake aside, we're talking some of the original sequels, even the ones that aren't that great I still really love because they're just, I don't know, they're kind of like cult kind of B movies in a way. But for me, the original 1968 classic is just that. I think it is a masterpiece. I think it is one of the best science fiction films ever made. You probably already know this if you heard me mention the film before, but yeah, I think it's one of the best science fiction films of all time, and it's also one of my personal favourite films. And you may be thinking this is a weird one, you know, to grow up at being one of your personal favourite films of all time, but it was probably one of, if not the very first science fiction film I ever saw. Obviously I grew up on more kid-friendly films when I was younger, like Disney films like Bambi and Snow White, for example, and those kind of things, but the first science fiction film I came to discover was Planet of the Apes, I think, the original 1968 film. But I must have been very young at the time because I just remember it completely blowing me away because it was unlike anything I'd ever seen before, because I've always been a big fan of sci-fi, fantasy and that kind of thing, but before Planet of the Apes I watched more fantastical films that were more kid-friendly, more just fluffy and light, and Planet of the Apes was like the first kind of genre movie I saw that was so much more intense and so much more just radical, unlike anything I'd ever seen before, and it really took me aback, and still to this day it's a movie that's really has stuck with me over the years. It's a science fiction film that is so much more intelligent and thought-provoking and complex. And 2001, funnily enough, also came out the very same year. They were released very close to one another, but I didn't see 2001 until much later. Planet of the Apes, like I said, I grew up loving it as a kid, and one of the things I like most about this film is something that it has in common with a lot of my favourite films, is that it's very different. And I love a lot of the other movies as well. Like I love the new movies with Rise and Dawn and War, but they're more of a different kind of thing, you know, almost more of a soft reboot in a way. But the original is so radical and bold and daring and audacious, unlike anything else, and I think it still holds up. There's arguments people have made that, oh, it's a little dated now, it doesn't really hold up. I disagree with that entirely. And granted, the modern day special effects and CGI with these new movies is unparalleled, and that will like always be superior. But what I love about the original is that people forget it had groundbreaking special effects for its time, also with the makeup work by John Chambers, and I think it still holds up. And that's the best thing about movies from back in the day that relied heavily upon practical effects, you know, makeup, is that 50 years later, it still works, you know, it still holds up. For its time, this was unparalleled in how, you know, groundbreaking revolution this was. So much so that they even got a special honorary award at the Oscars before makeup was even a category. This film had such incredible work there by John Chambers that it even got a special award before they even had makeup. Like a decade, I think, before makeup and hairstyling was even a category at the Oscars. That's how good this was. They're not meant to be apes as we know them. They're not apes as we know them in our world. They're more humanoid apes. They're apes that have evolved over thousands of years to be more human-like. So that's why I kind of buy it. In some of the other films, it's not really as convincing when they're supposed to be more like traditional apes and it just looks like people running around in ape suits with ape masks on. But in the original, I think it works because they are meant to be more humanoid apes. The apes that have evolved to be more human-like, to walk on two legs, to be more human in a way, and they can speak, and they are more human-like, even though they still are reminiscent of apes. But I think it still holds up, and I think it's just incredible, all the makeup work in this movie. And also talk about what actually transpires in the film itself. I love that this film has a very big kind of mysterious feel to it, where Charlton Heston's character of Taylor is stranded on this kind of desolate alien world with these other astronauts, and then he eventually comes to realise it is a planet of apes, and of course we get the big twist at the end, which I'm going to talk about obviously. But I love the story in this movie. It is simple, but it is effective as well, because it's a premise that you think there's not going to be much to it, and then it just, this constant surprises and twists and turns along the way that just keep you riveted and really keep you engaged. And it's a movie that really is rewarding on multiple viewings as well. Like I can watch this movie over and over again, and obviously you're never going to get that same effect that you have on the first time when you don't know the twist. And I remember watching this movie not knowing the twist. Of course, the fact that he sees the Statue of Liberty at the end and it's revealed that this has been Earth all along. I still contend to this day, I know I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit here, but I still contend that that is the single best movie twist or reveal of all time. I mean, it is just so incredibly striking and iconic. It's such a powerful moment. Obviously it comes right at the end of the film, so it's not as if it's halfway through the film and then we're dealing with a character coming to terms with that. It's literally the final shot of the film. It's such a bold choice. It's something that I don't know if would actually happen now, and we just end the camera lingering on the Statue of Liberty, nothing but the sound of the ocean, the waves coming to the shore there, and then we just fade to black. I just love endings like that. I just love endings that are very, I don't know what this says about me, but I love endings that are just very bleak, and it's like, what the hell, oh my god, and then it just ends. I do like endings that have resolutions to tied up neatly with a bow for sure, but there's also something great about an ending that's just a complete shock and then it just cuts. If it's done well, it really works, and Planet of the Apes is one of those best endings there is for just a big shocking twist and reveal, and I think it's just such an incredible moment. It is so powerful, and like I said, I remember seeing that for the first time, and it's probably hard to believe now that you could watch this movie and not see the ending coming, but I remember being a very young kid watching this movie, having no ideas, thinking they were on some weird desolate alien world where it's all topsy-turvy and the way around, and it speaks to how great the film is and how great the storytelling is that you don't really see it coming, and you're just so swept up and engaged and immersed in this film that when we do get that final moment at the end, it just completely takes you out of surprise. It's just one of the best shocking twist endings of all time, and it's just so incredibly powerful, really hits you, and you're just like, oh my god. I just love the story in this movie. I love, following Taylor, played by Charlton Heston. Say what you will about Charlton Heston in real life, but he was a great actor, and this is probably one of my favourite performances of his, because back in the day, he's this macho guy playing this strong man hero type, and this movie is kind of subverted this a little bit. It's kind of like what Tom Cruise did in Edge of Tomorrow, in that Tom Cruise, the action man, here he is in Edge of Tomorrow, where he's kind of like the coward, is kind of playing against type, and it's not exactly like that here, but it's kind of the same in that we don't really get the big action man Charlton Heston. We're getting this very cynical guy who's very nihilistic, and that's another thing I love about this movie. It's incredibly nihilistic. He really carries the movie, Heston, and just the interaction between him and the other characters and the journey his character goes on. It's such an incredible arc, because like I said, he starts off so incredibly cynical and nihilistic. He doesn't care about the world he's left behind. He doesn't care that he's left humanity behind to die. It's been thousands of years. He doesn't care. The other astronauts are really kind of worried. He doesn't care at all in the slightest. He's mocking the other astronauts, and he starts off almost like a villainous character. And that's another thing I love about this movie. It's something that a lot of people might overlook, but he's not playing the traditional hero guy. He's not a traditional protagonist at all in the conventional sense. He starts off almost more like a villain, really. You know, he's really harsh and cruel and horrible to these other astronauts, and we're like, we can't really get on his side. But it's the genius of this film that by putting him in this horrific situation with the apes and really stripping him down and completely breaking him, we kind of almost come to sympathise with him and come to, you know, we're on this journey with him. And like I said, this movie was made today. It probably would have started with a really nice guy, a really strong hero type protagonist, and this movie just doesn't do that. It really subverts that stereotype, and we get this guy in Charlton Heston as Taylor, who is kind of a likeable guy. He's kind of a bit of an asshole, really, but like I said, by putting him through these horrific situations, we come to kind of root for him in a way, because he's robbed of his voice, he's stripped down, he's treated worse than with an animal locked in a cage. And it's a really great journey that his character goes on, and like I said, how it ends there with him discovering the fact that he's been on Earth for long, and he breaks down. The same guy who didn't care about humanity at the beginning, he's breaking down on his knees in despair at the end. And you could read that in two ways. Maybe it's that he's now come to be distraught, and now he's changed. I kind of read it as that he's such a stubborn, arrogant arse that he's more angry at the fact that humanity have done this to the world, and now he's left with the aftermath of it. Obviously he's kind of emotional and upset because he can't believe the horrific nature of what he's seeing, but I think it's more anger that the people that he left behind, that he thought were gone, has screwed the world up, and now he's left to deal with this now. They've screwed the world up, they've died and gone, and now he's left now to deal with the aftermath of the mistakes they've made. And so I think he's more just pissed and angry at what they did. I just think he's such a great character to follow on this journey in this movie, and just the interactions he has with the other apes in the movie, with Cornelius and Zira, with Dr. Zaius. That back and forth is fascinating throughout the film, where Dr. Zaius is the character who secretly knows what's going on, and Charlton Heston's character is just furious with him, and we get that dynamic and that relationship that evolves throughout the film. And obviously I can't talk about this movie and not talk about the ideas, the themes, the social and political issues that are brought up in this movie, because you can't ignore it. It's an extremely political film. Obviously the ending is very much influenced by the fact that there was kind of nuclear paranoia at the time, that people were worried that we're going to have a nuclear war here, and that this is what could happen, you know, the world would be wiped out. And we get that shot of the Statue of Liberty there, but not just that, just the incredible amount of kind of social commentary, political subtext laid throughout this film. And you could say, oh, it's a bit on the nose and it's a bit in your face, and it kind of is. But in some of the later sequels, I think it's a little bit too on the nose. In this movie, I think it works because it is really thrown at you, but I think it works in this movie. It works in the first movie because it is so incredibly powerful, because of the situation that this character's in and this world that he's found himself in, and just the things that he's dealing with in this movie. By bringing up the including and interweaving these social and political themes in the movie. And again, I've said this time and time again, it's one of the best things science fiction can do, is that they can provide a reflection of our world and our society within the context of a fantastical dystopian world. And it's very much what Planet of the Apes does. It's this post-apocalyptic future, but it's almost a reflection of our society as it was at the time, and scary enough, almost like it is now, really, in terms of dealing with issues like race, like class structure, like the corrupt power that the apes have in store, where it's very corrupt leadership there, with the orangutans on top and the chimpanzees and the gorillas working underneath the orangutans. And obviously it's no coincidence that the orangutans are fairer skinned and the chimps and the gorillas are darker skinned, and they're at the bottom. Like I said, this sequel, it's so much more force in your face, and I just don't think it works because it's just way too on the nose. In the first movie, I think it's so much more powerful because there's a lot in the first film that is quite subtle as well. It is very deliberate and very much thrown at you, but I would argue it also is very kind of subtle at times as well, and because of that it's just so much more powerful. And like I said, it's one of the best things that science fiction films can do, is that they can comment on our world and our society and get us thinking about how these same issues are at play within our world. And it kind of makes it more powerful when we see it reflected back to us in a sci-fi film. It's this fantastical world with larger than life crazy characters and concepts. When we see these kind of issues that we're dealing with in our world, reflected back to us within a sci-fi fantasy film, it kind of makes it hit home more. We can't believe some of the things we're seeing on screen, and it gets you thinking like, oh my god, we're kind of doing the same thing in our world. It's one of the reasons why science fiction is one of my favourite genres. They can really reflect, you know, our world right back at us and explore these themes and these issues that in a non-sci-fi fantasy genre film probably would have been way too forced on the nose, but within the context of a sci-fi fantasy film, it's so much more powerful, it's so much more meaningful, and it really hits home a whole lot more. I'm going to try and wind down here, but before I finish up, I've got a couple more things I've got to mention. One of them being the cinematography of this film. I love how this film looks and how it's shot, and it's another contentious thing that's debated, that maybe there's certain shots and certain transitions and certain effects that are used that maybe don't hold up now, and I would disagree with that. One of them being the zooms. There's a lot of zooms in this film, and that's something that I would agree that doesn't hold up now and doesn't work in movies now and wouldn't necessarily, you know, hold up in, you know, older films. But with Planet of the Apes, I disagree, because it's used very intentionally in Planet of the Apes. It's used a lot, and it's used to evoke a very particular feeling from you as an audience member. You know, it's either to highlight the ridiculous of something, or to just really increase the tension and the shock factor of something. You know, it really kind of just sucks you in and draws you in and focuses your attention on something very particular in the movie, and I think it really works. It's really effective. If it wasn't as effective as it was, and if it wasn't for used for that very specific purpose of evoking a specific feeling from you when watching it, then I would agree of it not holding up. And like I said, I don't think zooms really work in movies now, just like crossfades don't really work, cross dissolves. But the zooms in Planet of the Apes, I think, still hold up and still work, because it's used in a very particular way to evoke very particular feelings from you. And I think the zooms do work, do still hold up. And I just love how this film is shot in a very kind of just visceral and real way. There's a lot of scenes that are kind of handheld, where they just enhance the frantic, fast-paced, frenetic nature of the sequence that is happening, like when Charlton Heston's Taylor escapes and he's trying to run away and the apes are cornering him, throwing stuff at him. Got this handheld camera here that's just following him, and it really works to just, like I said, enhance that feeling of just chaos and just the frenetic energy of that scene, where he's scared, we're scared, it's crazy, he's trying to get away and he's running away from these apes here. The handheld camera work, I think, really works. And just in terms of just certain shots in this film, there's so much striking imagery as well. The scarecrows, that sequence is really incredible, and that's something that's kind of been paid homage in some of the newer films as well. Seeing the scarecrows at the border, the forbidden zone there. There's so much striking visual imagery in this film. It's one of the things that makes it such an iconic film, is that, you know, still to this day, there's certain images, there's certain lines, there's certain shots paid homage to in pop culture today. It's so heavily ingrained into pop culture. It'd probably be a hard film to watch now and just get the whole full effect, because it's a film that has been referenced and parodied so many times and paid homage in so many different films. But yeah, I think it is stunning from a visual standpoint. I just love how this film is shot. Really immersive and engaging. It really draws you in and sucks you into the world of the film. And one of the last things I had to talk about here, I just have not really got time to talk about everything. I'm trying to be as broad and general as I possibly can, while still going in depth on certain things without being too specific. But the last thing I've got to talk about is the incredible score by Jerry Goldsmith, I believe, who later went on to do Alien. And it's a very experimental score. It was a very different experimental score for its time. You know, there was a certain instrument, I think, used for that scene when we first see the apes. Another incredibly iconic scene when we see the apes for the first time. And that's another thing in this movie that's very much kind of up to debate. It's a very long build-up before we actually see the apes. For me, I think it really works. It's really worth it, because it gives us time to become immersed into the world of the film and become fully engaged in what's happening. And then when we finally get that moment, like half an hour in, when we introduce the apes for the first time, it is so much more powerful and impactful because of that long, drawn-out, extended build-up. So when we see the apes on the horseback with the guns for the first time, it is such a powerful scene. It really hits you. And like I said, the music going very experimental for its time, very different, but I think still holds up, and it really adds to the chaos of this scene, just the alarming nature of the moment where he just sees these apes for the first time on horseback, and we're like, oh my god. And we have that music there where it's almost like an alarm that really adds to the alarming nature of the scene, and it's just incredible. There's just so many things I know about this film. Had to talk about the score there right at the end. The score by Jerry Goldsmith it's great. It's probably quite underrated actually, and yeah, it's maybe a little bit over the top at times, like a lot of movies were back in the day, but I think it's a score that still holds up, and it's one of the best in terms of just really enhancing and, you know, making the images on screen even more powerful, and they just really just jump off the screen, really come at you, and the music really helps to do that. And so there we go, that wraps up my thoughts on the 1968 Planet of the Apes. I just love this movie. I think it's incredible. There's just so much I could say about this film. There's just so much I absolutely adore, just from the social and political subtext, you know, the social commentary in this film, just the movie itself in terms of just the story and the character of Taylor, the journey that he goes on, the fact that it's such a bold, daring and ambitious film that is just so incredibly audacious. It's just such a kind of uncompromising vision that is put forth to us in this movie that has stuck with me so much over the years. It really takes me aback every time I go back and revisit this film, how much of a bold, striking, uncompromising vision this film really is. I think it truly is one of the best science fiction films of all time. I could go on and on for hours about how much I love this film, but those are my general thoughts on the movie. Have you seen the classic 1968 Planet of the Apes? You probably have. And if so, what do you think about it? Is it one of your favourite films? Do you think it isn't that great? Do you think it holds up or not? What are your feelings? What are your thoughts and opinions on the 1968 Planet of the Apes? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, if you like this video and you haven't already, be sure to go ahead and click that thumbs up button. If you're new here, be sure to go ahead and click subscribe. If you want to catch up on some of my recent videos, be sure to go ahead and click over here. But with that said, I've been David O'Sullivan. I'll see you next time.